After obliterations, negotiations with an enemy who was defeated, Islamabad talks, a real chance for peace or just a pause?
From Lisbon, this is Frontlines and Backrooms Brief, the stories shaping the week.
Welcome to this week's Frontlines and Backrooms Brief. Direct negotiations in Islamabad have started to end the war, which President Trump has won 8 times since March. After extending his final Iran deadline for the 5th time, the president informed us that it was the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif who convinced him to start the negotiations. The basis for the negotiations, Iran's 10-point plan, also confirmed by the president in a post on Truth Social. That plan includes guarantees that Iran will not be attacked again and a permanent end to the war, the lifting of all US sanctions, Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, including $2 million transit fee partly used for reconstruction. This would be in conflict with the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. After weeks of threats, including complete destruction of one civilization, never to come back, the question was how to spin the whole story. The day after, it was Caroline Leavitt's job to convince the public that they didn't see what the president posted on Truth Social.
The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States, and that is false.
Vice President J.D. Vance is leading the team. That confirms the reports that after 2 failed negotiations, Iranians were not ready to talk again with Stephen Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Here is the Vice President just hours before leaving for Islamabad.
We're looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. We'll, of course, see. As the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The President has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
And what are the clear guidelines? In President Trump's own words, no nuclear weapons. Number one, that is 99% of it. The president once again repeated that the regime in Iran has changed and that the Strait of Hormuz would open automatically when the war stops. Asked about a backup plan in case negotiations fail and the Strait of Hormuz stays closed, the president said,
You don't need a backup plan. We have the military is defeated. Their military is gone. We've degraded just about everything. They have very few missiles. They have very little manufacturing capability. We've hit them hard. Our military is amazing, the job they've done.
Iranians are entering these negotiations with a bittersweet feeling, an undefeated but weakened party, after paying a high price in human lives and devastation across the country. So, is it possible to reach an agreement? Let's check what is on table. Control of the Strait of Hormuz plus $2 million transit fee versus free passage, no tolls. Right to enrich uranium versus complete dismantlement and no enrichment. Immediate full removal of sanctions versus gradual relief linked to compliance. Regarding proxies, full protection from US and Israeli attacks versus Iran must stop supporting them. US troops in the region, complete withdrawal versus no withdrawal whatsoever. And reparations. Between those maximalist demands lies the narrow path for diplomacy and the art of realistic possibilities. And there are few. President Obama's administration and its allies took almost 2 years to negotiate the first Iranian nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA. President Trump wants everything wrapped up in 2 weeks. Not realistic. But with an agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, an extended ceasefire for 30 to 60 days, and continued technical talks on the nuclear and missile program, he would get an off-ramp out of this war. a ramp he desperately needs. Complete success would stabilize global oil markets, ease inflation pressures, and reduce the risk of a wider regional war. Failure would trigger what the International Energy Agency calls the greatest global energy security challenge in history. More importantly, the region could fall into total war, with unparalleled consequences. The talks in Islamabad are historic, but they are not just about peace, they are about managing collapse. Neither side can afford to walk away. Iran needs sanctions relief. The US needs oil prices to stabilize before the midterm elections. But neither is ready to make the concessions required for a comprehensive deal. A comprehensive deal is unlikely. The trust deficit is too deep, the demands too far apart. The best possible outcome is an extended ceasefire and partial reopening of Hormuz, enough to lower oil prices and buy time. The worst possible outcome is a return to war, a full closure of the strait, and a global economic crisis that makes the 1970s oil shocks look mild. While the world watched Islamabad, another crisis was unfolding in Washington. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte came to save the alliance. He left with a front row seat to its funeral. President Trump didn't hide his contempt. After the private meeting, which according to sources was very unpleasant, he posted, "NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice." This is not diplomacy, this is a divorce feeling. Trump's demands are simple and impossible. He wants NATO allies to send ships to the Strait of Hormuz. He wants them to commit within days, not weeks. He wants them to prove their loyalty by joining a war they never agreed to. The administration is reportedly considering a pay-to-play model. NATO members that don't meet defense spending targets could be excluded from decision-making, including Article 5 votes. The Pentagon is even planning to move troops out of unhelpful countries like Spain and Germany and relocate them to supportive ones like Poland, Romania, and Lithuania. The message is clear. Loyalty is transactional. The alliance is a business, and Trump is the only shareholder. Europe is not bending, it's breaking. At a private dinner in Helsinki, leaders from 10 northern European countries, including the UK, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, agreed on one thing. They cannot consent to Trump's demands. We all want the war to end, but we are not on the same page as the US, one official said. Most Europeans were not informed beforehand, and the Gulf has nothing to do with NATO. The verdict from European diplomats is grim. One EU official put it bluntly. NATO is paralyzed. They can't even have meetings. Another said, it is pretty clear NATO is already falling apart. Trump has achieved what no adversary could. He has unified Europe against the United States. Many are calling NATO Secretary General's approach to President Trump spineless. And that is an unfair assessment. He is not a statesman. He is in charge of the largest military alliance in the world, with the impossible task of saving something many have already written off. So Mark Rutte is caught in an impossible position. He told CNN the meeting was very frank and very open. Diplomatic code for "we screamed at each other." He admitted Trump is clearly disappointed with many NATO allies. He conceded that the president wants concrete commitments within days. But Rutte also tried to push back. He told Trump that many European countries did help with basing, logistics, and overflights. "It's therefore announced picture," he said. Trump's Truth Social post suggests the nuance was lost. Europe is already preparing for a world without the United States. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez went further. In his speech at the European Pulse Forum 2026 in Barcelona, he said European security can no longer depend on the will of the third parties, calling for the establishment of a European army.
Habrán escuchado ustedes cuál es el planteamiento de España.
You already heard what Spain's approach is. We are ready to move towards a common European army, not in 10 or 2 years, but now, tomorrow. And those who think this decision is optional are mistaken. In the world we live in today, middle powers, which are the ones making up the European Union, we have only one way of asserting ourselves in security and defense, and that is to build a common defense. Otherwise, we will allow again to others to use our vulnerabilities against us.
More than 40 countries met virtually to discuss reopening the Strait of Hormuz without US leadership. The UK convened nations from Europe, the Middle East, and Asia to plan diplomatic outreach to Tehran. Military planners will meet next week to discuss how their naval assets could help police and demine the strait after the fighting stops. There is a little appetite for force. They know the strait cannot be reopened without Iran's agreement. But the message is clear. Europe is learning to walk without Washington. The alliance is not dead, yet. But the assumptions that held it together for 77 years are gone. NATO was built on trust. That trust is now also gone. It was built on shared values. Those values are now contested. It was built on the promise that an attack on one is an attack on all. The promise has now been questioned so often it has lost meaning. Trump wants loyalty. Europe wants partnership. Those are not the same thing. And in the gap between them, 77 years of transatlantic unity is quietly being dismantled. Not by Russia, not by China, but by the man who was supposed to lead it. And that's the world this week. From the Frontlines and Backrooms, I'm Vladimir Bobatic. And until next time, keep looking beyond the noise.